Nobody plans a moment like this. Nobody walks into the studio saying this is the song that will sit at number 1 for 13 weeks, bend radio to its will, and quietly rewrite the emotional language of hip-hop and R&B in the same breath. That's the irony at the center of Luther, the Kendrick Lamar and SZA collaboration that dominated the Billboard Hot 100, earned Grammy nominations for Song and Record of the Year, and became one of the defining records of the year. According to the people who made it, Luther was never meant to be a song at all. It was supposed to be a pause, a breath, an interlude that lived between bigger ideas. And somehow, that makes its success feel even more inevitable. Welcome to celebrity rap life, where the red carpets never roll up and the spotlight never fades. The rewards are legendary. Because in celebrity rap life, every downfall can become a comeback, and every headline tells a deeper story. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a second of what's coming next. To understand how Luther became what it is, you have to understand the environment it was born into. Kendrick Lamar doesn't make albums casually. He builds them slowly, deliberately, like architectural projects where every sound has a purpose and every silence matters just as much as the noise. GNX, the album Luther lives on, wasn't created in response to a trend, a chart position, or even a rap war. It was years in the making, quietly taking shape long before the world was distracted by diss tracks and social media scorekeeping. Producer Soundwave has been there for most of Kendrick's creative evolution, and his fingerprints are all over GNX. In a Rolling Stone piece published in mid-December, Soundwave pulled back the curtain on the unlikely origin of Luther. No drums. No grand plan. No pressure. Just a sample sitting and used for years, and a moment that finally unlocked it. The sample itself carries weight. If This World Were Mine, the 1982 duet by Luther Vandross and Cheryl Lynn, isn't just a classic. It's a song that represents intimacy, longing, and an almost spiritual sense of devotion. It's the kind of record people don't touch lightly, especially not in hip-hop, where sampling something that revered can either elevate your work or collapse it under the weight of comparison. For a long time, Kendrick and Soundwave had that sample in their possession, waiting. They couldn't crack it. It didn't want to be forced. That patience matters. In an era where artists rush to drop, rush to respond, rush to capitalize on moments, Kendrick sat with this piece of music for years. Soundwave described the earliest version of Luther as nothing more than chopped fragments of the sample, and Kendrick humming melodies over it. No percussion. No structure. Just instinct. That detail is important because it reveals how Kendrick approaches creation. Before lyrics, before concepts, before narratives, there's feeling. There's melody. There's emotion trying to find a shape. The breakthrough came quietly. One specific melody. That's all it took. Soundwave knew instantly that what they had wasn't small. It wasn't transitional. It wasn't something you tuck away between heavier tracks. It was the kind of idea that demands space. The kind of idea that tells you what it wants to be if you're willing to listen. SCA's presence on Luther feels inevitable in hindsight, but it's also a reflection of trust. Kendrick doesn't collaborate casually, and when he does, it's rarely decorative. SZA isn't there to soften the record or add radio appeal. She's there because her voice understands vulnerability in the same way Kendrick understands conflict. When they meet on Luther, it feels less like a feature and more like two emotional languages overlapping. The final version of Luther doesn't rush you. It doesn't beg for attention. It drifts. It lingers. It lets the Vandross and Lynn sample breathe, wrapping it in modern context without stripping away its soul. Kendrick's performance is restrained, almost reverent. SZA floats through the track with a presence that feels intimate rather than performative. The result is a song that doesn't scream its importance, yet somehow stays with you longer than louder records ever could. That quiet power translated into something rare. 13 weeks at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Not because it followed a formula, but because it broke one. Luther didn't feel like a hit engineered for streaming algorithms. It felt like a record people kept returning to because it said something they couldn't quite articulate themselves. By the end of the year, it stood as the second biggest song on the year-end Hot 100, only trailing Bruno Mars and Lady Gaga's Die with a Smile. For a song that was once an interlude, that's a staggering outcome. Awards followed naturally. Grammy nominations for Song of the Year and Record of the Year. A nod for Best Melodic Rap Performance. Recognition not just of popularity, but of craft. These nominations place Luther in a lineage of records that bridge genres rather than choosing sides. It exists comfortably in hip-hop, R&B, and pop spaces without ever feeling like it compromised itself to get there. The story of Luther is also inseparable from the story of GNX itself. While much of the public conversation around Kendrick Lamar in recent years has been dominated by his highly publicized clash with Drake, Soundwave made it clear that GNX was not born from that moment. The album had been developing long before the rap war reignited in 2024. That context matters because it reframes how the album should be heard. GNX isn't reactionary. It isn't fueled by rivalry. It's reflective. Soundwave worked closely with co-producer Jack Antonoff and songwriter Inc. on the project, blending different creative perspectives without diluting Kendrick's vision. Antonoff's involvement raised eyebrows when it was first reported, but GNX makes the collaboration make sense. The album moves fluidly between raw hip-hop, melodic introspection, and experimental textures. It sounds like artists pushing each other rather than compromising. There's a moment Soundwave described that feels like the emotional thesis of GNX. He has a personal rule when it comes to Kendrick's albums. If he doesn't shed a tear by the final second, the album isn't finished. That standard isn't about sadness. It's about honesty. It's about whether the work reached a place that feels undeniably true. For GNX, that moment came at 6 a.m, when the last song faded out and the room went quiet. Soundwave cried. That's when he knew they were done. That detail casts Luther in a different light. It's not just a hit single that happened to emerge from the sessions. It's part of the emotional arc that brought the entire album to completion. It represents the patience, vulnerability, and restraint that define GNX as a whole. It's proof that sometimes the most powerful moments in music come from what wasn't planned. There's also something poetic about Luther Vandross's name echoing through modern charts via a song that honors his legacy without exploiting it. Sampling can be extractive when done carelessly. Here, it feels conversational. Kendrick and SZA aren't using "If This World Were Mine" as a shortcut to nostalgia. They're extending its emotional conversation into a new generation. The song asks similar questions about love, devotion, and imagination, but through voices shaped by different experiences. In a year crowded with loud moments, viral controversies, and rapid cycles of attention, Luther stood apart by moving slowly. It didn't arrive with spectacle. It didn't rely on controversy. It earned its place by being quietly undeniable. That's rare. Especially in the current landscape, where longevity often feels impossible without constant reinvention or provocation. Looking back, the idea that Luther was once just an interlude feels almost symbolic. It reminds you that greatness often starts in the margins. In the moments artists aren't trying to impress anyone. In the hours where there are no drums, no expectations, and no audience yet. Just a melody, a memory, and the courage to let a feeling lead. Kendrick Lamar has always understood that music isn't just about sound. It's about timing. About knowing when to speak and when to hold back. Luther embodies that philosophy. It waits. It listens. And when it finally speaks, it does so with a clarity that resonates far beyond charts and trophies. GNX will be remembered as one of Kendrick's most carefully constructed works, an album that arrived fully formed rather than hurried into relevance. Luther will likely stand as its emotional centerpiece, not because it was designed to be, but because it revealed itself to be necessary. And that might be the most Kendrick Lamar outcome possible. A song that was never supposed to exist, becoming exactly what the moment needed. This story is far from over, and the truth is still unfolding. I want to hear what you think. Drop your take in the comments. And if you don't want to miss the next twist, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a second of what's coming next.